I can't just turn my back on 14 years without feeling some kind of, not regrets, but I'm going to miss the fans. I'm going to miss Candlestick. I'm going to miss Mr. D. I'm going to miss the guys. And if I didn't, this team wouldn't be the special thing that it is.
Jennifer, this is going to be a family move, of course. That's
no,
going to be...
I told him yesterday we weren't going. I forgot to let him know.
That's going to be a tough situation. You've got to go to Kansas City and look for schools and a place to live and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, there's no denying it. It'll be difficult all around because it's a move for the children. They'll adapt. But more than that, it's, you know, we're so used to having him come home here and we get a certain amount of his time. There I know, even though the offense will be similar, it's a new place, and his mind and all of his thoughts, everything will have to be really with Kansas City and trying to make it work and doing the right thing. And so I know we're kind of going to be on our own for the first time. Joe has always been through football. He's been first and foremost a family man, and he's been able to leave work where it is and come home, but I have a feeling it's not going to be that way. I think it's going to be about 24 hours of the day there. So
you guys really threw everybody for a loop on Monday because everyone was expecting, okay, you've been named the so-called starting quarterback again, and everybody said it was just formality, that you were going to be with the 49ers, and then it didn't happen. It didn't happen. You said, no, Kansas City is the place I want to be. There are a lot of theories about why you wanted to go to Kansas City and not be here in San Francisco, but what really was the bottom line?
Well, I think a couple of days before I left, it had been reiterated again, the fact that, you know, Steve was the quarterback, and when I left here in full intention to try to get a job with Kansas City or Phoenix, and the decision was Kansas City, and we had made that decision, and you know, we had agreed with them. We had dinner that night, and we discussed it, and in all terms, in all essence, we are on our way to Kansas City. It was just to be worked out with the 49ers. And I was on my way to Mr. Bartolo's, actually, when I got there, and that's, you know, when they came up with this, I guess while we were en route, or even maybe earlier that day, or maybe even the night before, I don't really know. But at that point in time, I had given my word to the Chiefs, and it was difficult to go back on my word. If I did, then my word wouldn't mean anything to me or to anybody else. But number two, even once I was told of it, I sat back and I thought about the whole deal and went over with Jennifer and Peter, and for everyone involved, it would have been just chaotic next year. I mean, number one, I never really asked for the job back. All I wanted was to compete for it. And to go ahead and make that kind of a drastic move, I know it was done because they really wanted me to stay. Inside their heart, they wanted me to stay. And I would love to have stayed. But at that point, it was just, it had gotten to a point where it was tough to turn back on. When we take a look at the whole situation, the transition had been made to Stevie. He had a great year. And, you know, I still was looking for an opportunity to play. And that's what I felt was my best opportunity, and also relieves this organization of somewhat of a, I don't want to say a nightmare for lack of better words. And, you know, the media, no matter who was first or second, going into training camp was just going to be absolutely chaos.
It could have been very disruptive to everybody at that point.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I want to do, is disrupt this organization. They have a great football team and have a great chance to go back to the Super Bowl again, and that would be my druthers, to go back to the Super Bowl. But after being there 4 times the way I've been there, it'd be difficult to be there and not being able to play.
Well, let's talk about better things. You leaving so many people here in the Bay Area with so many memories. Jennifer, any special memories that you have? Any favorite time, Joe, on the field and all the time he's been here?
I think probably the most meaningful one was the Detroit game. Even though it didn't mean anything to the 49ers as far as their schedule, at that point, I really looked at it as his audition tape for the rest of the NFL, because you could feel it coming. And so the other thing is just the fans have been so supportive the whole time, and that really showed it on a rainy, windy, cold night. There was 56 or so thousand out there, and there was for no other reason than Joe at that point to watch him play. And I know it was probably the most difficult game that he played after not playing in almost 2 years, and just hoping that, like he said, everybody would be on the same page and just give him the opportunity. So.
You said you were a little nervous going into that game. Your thoughts on other times? So you've had so many great occasions in that San Francisco uniform. Is there any one or maybe two that stick out in your mind that you enjoyed the most?
I would agree with Jennifer. Probably right now off the top would be that. There were probably a couple other occasions. I think you have to go back to all the Super Bowls, and but the other was coming back from my back surgery. I think was pretty exciting, and the fan appreciation at that time was wonderful again. And those are the kind of things that make you want to strive and drive to stay in the game and to perform it the best you can and try to get that team back and to the Super Bowl again. And when you see the way that they react to what we did on the field when I came back, and that really says to me, keep playing, so.
Sure. You mentioned the fans several times, both of you, and I know that what they have done and the way they have felt about you and your career has meant a lot to you. Is there any special thing you'd like to say to the Bay Area fans before you go?
Well, I think, number one, I would just like to say thank you for all the support and that they've shown to me and my family over the years. It's beyond question or any kind of doubt that they've been behind us 100%, and it really, as I said earlier, makes you or me inside want to strive to do the best that I can for them and to make this whole Bay Area feel that that team is a winner. And the appreciation, I wish I could show enough of my appreciation to them for the things the appreciation they've shown me over the years, but it's almost impossible. It's just, I could never catch up to them. And the other is that I just hope that they understand about this decision, that it wasn't just the 49ers, and they'll look at it from a little bigger picture and see the outside of it from the outside and say that this probably is what's best for the 49ers at this time, and that all weighed on our decision is that we looked at the future of them, and this is the best thing for them going into the rest of the 90s, and for me to get an opportunity to play again, and not just sparingly.
I think that it's pretty, I don't even know if there are words to describe the times that we've been up and down. There's been so much support. They seem, it was never ending when they were being called yahoos or whatever, names by, just because they were supporting him. They just kept coming back and kept fighting for what they thought, what they felt and believed in. And it just gave us the strength really to go on and keep looking at things. And that was also in the deciding factor when we sat down with Mr. DeBartolo, Carmen Policy, and George. It's not only all of our lives in this living room have been on a roller coaster for the last few months, but we had to consider everybody outside, and that was brought up is take a look at the fans. And Joe's here, he's not, he's here, he's not. And they're on the same roller coaster and wishful thinking and all, and that's what we really felt is we got to put an end to it. It's got to stop for them as much as it is for all of us.
Well, I don't want to say goodbye.
And that's only part of Wayne Walker's exclusive interview. We will have much more on Eyewitness News at 5 and 6 today. Briefly recapping what's going on here, Joe Montana is going to Kansas City. Kansas City gets Montana, safety David Whitmore, and a third-round 1994 draft pick. San Francisco gets a first-round pick in the draft next week. Joe Montana briefly said it would have been nutty had he stayed here. He said it was difficult, but he also said that he hopes that the fans here will remain 49er fans. He will remain a 49er fan as well. Wouldn't it be interesting to hear what he has to say if Kansas City and the 49ers get in the Super Bowl? Club owner Edward DeBartolo said it was a deep personal loss for him. Club president Carmen Policy said if we could reverse it, we would, but we can't. Two little pieces of news. One was there was a hint of some future relationship between Joe Montana and the 49ers. They wouldn't talk about it, but they played around the edges of it. And also, Carmen Policy said When asked if they had ever considered trading Steve Young, that Steve Young's agent had told them very clearly that if such a thing was considered, Steve Young would consider retiring. And policy said no, that was never a practical consideration. You're up to date. 14 years of Joe Montana in the Bay Area coming to a close. We are going to have more on this at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, more of the exclusive interview with Wayne Walker, where Joe and Jennifer say goodbye to the fans. We're going to go to a break. We are then going to return to our regular programming. I'm Bill Schechner. I'll be back at noon with the news then. Thanks for your company. Goodbye.
Eyewitness News at noon.
The San Francisco 49ers have just completed the most difficult task this franchise has faced since its very inception. Joe Montana has been traded to the Kansas City Chiefs pursuant to his request.
Club President Carmen Policy makes it official. That was this morning. Joe Montana, the man who brought so many victories to the red and gold, is a Niner no longer. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Schechner, and here is some of the news. Joe Montana and his former bosses on the 49ers made the announcement together this morning to show that there are no hard feelings. Channel 5 Sports' Rick Kwan was at the Niners headquarters when the word became official. Good afternoon, Rick.
Good afternoon, Bill. Well, before a jam-packed conference room here at 49er headquarters in Santa Clara, Joe Montana, perhaps the greatest quarterback ever, said goodbye to the Bay Area. As you know, Joe is going to Kansas City, and there are three main reasons why. Number one, it relieves the 49ers of that ever-living question, who will start for the 49ers? It takes that blame off of the 49ers that they did want to start Steve Young. Number two is that Joe is familiar with the offensive system being installed in Kansas City. It's being installed by Paul Hackett, a former quarterback coach here with the 49ers. And number three, the Chiefs went 10-6 last year. They still have a very good chance of reaching the Super Bowl, something that Joe really wants to play in one more time. Now, in wrapping up today's news conference, Joe had this message to the fans who supported him here in San Francisco.
Closing, I'd just like to say a few things that my family and I would like to thank all the fans and for all their support throughout the years and through the rough times and through the good times, and I hope of their continued support of this organization and of the team. And we've had some rocky times in here, but when it comes down to it, I will miss you, some a little more than others, but and to thank you to Mr. DeBarlo and the whole 49er organization from us for giving us the opportunity to experience the NFL and be able to reach goals that we both had set for ourselves, and the opportunity for us to make the friendships that we've made over the years here, and that it's all because of him that this organization was turned around. And I hope that in this light that everyone would still support this team and not have some of the feelings that I've been hearing around, because all in all, it is a great organization.
Joe will be going to Kansas City later today, and a news conference will be held tomorrow to introduce him as the newest Chief. As for the question of what number will he wear as a Chief, the number 16 was worn by Lynn Dawson. That number has been retired and will not come out of retirement. The number 3 was worn by Jan Stenerud. Joe wore number 3 while he was at Notre Dame. That number will also remain retired. So the question of what number will Joe wear remains to be answered. This is Rick Kwan reporting live from Santa Clara.
Rick, let me toss you what may be a curve. I know that they're in different parts of the league, but will San Francisco and Kansas City ever meet in a regular season game, or do we have to wait for a Super Bowl for that?
They're not scheduled for this season, but that question was brought up during the news conference. Had he thought about meeting the 49ers in the Super Bowl? And Joe said, yeah, I thought about that just a little bit.
Well, he said he was going to remain a 49er fan probably until that moment, huh?
Probably so. You know, one thing I should mention throughout this news conference, there seemed to be a mood of let's make up and move on. Joe is not holding any animosity at all towards the franchise. He wants the 49er fans to remain supportive of the team, even though he is leaving this franchise. Both sides very emotional, and they don't want to leave this with a lot of hard feelings.
Thank you very much, Rick Kwan. Rick will be back at 5 and at 6 with more on the day's developments. It now is official, Joe Montana to Kansas City. We will also have an exclusive interview. Wayne Walker did one with Joe and Jennifer Montana. Wayne and Joe and Jennifer spoke this morning at the Montana's home. Joe told Wayne why he couldn't take the 49ers offer as the starting quarterback. Here is just a portion of that exclusive interview.
For everyone involved, it would have been just chaotic next year. I mean, number one, I never really asked for the job back. All I wanted was to compete for it. And to go ahead and make that kind of a drastic move, I know it was done because they really wanted me to stay. Inside their heart, they wanted me to stay. And I would love to have stayed. But at that point, it was just, it had gotten to a point where it was tough to turn back on. When we take a look at the whole situation, the transition had been made to Stevie. He had a great year. And, you know, I still was looking for an opportunity to play. And that's what I felt was my best opportunity, and also relieves this organization of somewhat of a, I'll say a nightmare for lack of better words. And, you know, the media, no matter who was first or second, going into training camp was just going to be absolutely chaos.
It could have been very disruptive to everybody at that point.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I want to do is disrupt this organization.
You can see extended portions of this exclusive interview between Wayne Walker and Joe and Jennifer Montana on Eyewitness News at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock tonight. You want to be around for that. And if you think this is just a local story, well, guess again. I mean, Joe Montana is one of the most successful quarterbacks in pro football, a mainstay of the franchise. There he is all over the front page of, that's the Sacramento paper, yet here he is all over the cover of Sports Illustrated with all of his Super Bowl rings and stuff. Big day in sports. So we're going to break with our normal form chart. We're going to stick with sports, and we have a very lucky break. Our guest today is longtime Bay Area sports writer and columnist Leonard Coppet. He writes for the Peninsula Times-Tribune. He's written for the New York Times. He's done sports for public broadcasting. He knows a lot. We scheduled him to talk about his new book. It's called The Man in the Dugout. It's about baseball managers. It's a neat book. It's in the stores. But we're going to talk about Joe Montana, because we'd get lynched if we didn't.
Yes, and because I'd like to. I've covered football even longer than I've covered baseball over the last 50 years, and I've covered the 49ers specifically since Eddie bought them 17 years ago. So I have feelings about this, too.
Do you buy it? Joe Montana says he left because it would be a nutty situation if he stayed. Do you think that's really it?
I buy it completely. Joe is a football player and an intelligent man. He knows much better than fans and writers how disruptive it would be if you had Young and Montana in camp at the same time. No matter who was designated as what, no matter what anybody said about competition, what you would have is a divided team. Some players preferring one, some players preferring others, and the coaches in an impossible situation, whatever decision they made, because they'd be displeasing someone. So to a certain extent, there's a bit of altruism in his stepping out. The only alternative would be to keep him and get rid of Young. And Joe himself, in his press conference today, touched on the key point there. When a football team has a great quarterback, and you're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, when he leaves, as he will sooner or later, it's very, very difficult to find an adequate replacement. Many teams have been in trouble for 20 years after their great quarterback left. In this case, you've got the successor already on hand. So what you're choosing really is a 7-year time horizon over a 2-year time horizon. And that's the sensible thing to do, and he sees that.
So then in terms of the franchise, DeBartolo and policy did the right thing, even though it may be very difficult for all of us emotionally to get used to this.
I think clearly that's the case. Because look at it the other way. Suppose Young goes, Joe plays 2 more years without incident, no injuries or anything like that, but then sooner or later he has to retire. Then what? This way, the then what is already on hand. You've made the transition last year out of necessity. You might as well continue along that path.
How do you think he's going to do in Kansas City? It's a whole different kettle of fish out there,
I think Joe Montana is going to do great wherever he goes, unless he gets hurt. The whole question in that sport is physical ability.
So it will not be a big adjustment for him? I mean, he shows up, and he's a big deal, you know? Well, I mean, that's a lot to overcome, right?
Yeah,
he
but
carries enormous baggage.
It's something to overcome. It's also an asset, because others are in awe of you and respond to that. But as he says himself, he's going into a system. They're going to put in a system that he's familiar with. He's going to be more familiar with it than the other players. Again, as he pointed out himself.
And what about
I think he'll do fine.
What about the Niners? How are they going to do? A quick prediction.
The Niners, to me, are a very, very strong football team year after year, and they got that way by making hard-headed decisions over the years, and now they've sort of been forced into a hard-headed decision.
Well, that's what DeBartolo said, or was it policy? One of them said, you got to do the thing and move on, and if you don't, people will pass you by.
Right. And the same fans who are unhappy at his leaving would be more unhappy 2 years from now if they were losing.
The name of the book is The Man in the Dugout. The name of the author is Leonard Coppet. It's a great baseball book. Tell me briefly, there's the Coppet plan for dealing with all of this, though,
yes,
right?
I think next year the Kansas City team should play in Candlestick, and the 49ers should play in Kansas City, so the San Francisco fans could watch Montana, and Kansas City would have a better team to look at. Everybody would be happy.
Would you work the phones on that one this afternoon, Leonard, and let us know if you can work it out?
Well, we report the news. We don't make it.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there. Will you come back sometime and talk baseball?
Anytime you want.
Great, great. Leonard Coppet, thank you so much. Over there. Hi. Okay, we now have to switch gears and get a little bit serious because the subject is a little bit more serious. We're going to talk about Waco, Texas. Authorities have found 40 bodies in the burned-out wreckage of the Branch Division.
All I wanted was to compete for it and to go ahead and make that kind of a drastic move. I know it was done because they really wanted me to stay inside their heart. They wanted me to stay, and I would love to have stayed. But at that point, it was just, it had gotten to a point where it was tough to turn back on. I mean, we take a look at the whole situation, the transition that had been made to Steve. He has had a great year, and, you know, I still was looking for an opportunity to play, and that's what I felt was my best opportunity, and also relieves this organization of a somewhat of a, I don't want to say a nightmare for lack of better words, and, you know, the media, no matter who was first or second, going into training camp was just going to be absolutely chaos.
It could have been very disruptive to everybody at that point.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I want to do is disrupt this organization.
Jennifer, any special memories that you have? Any favorite time, Joe, on the field and all the time he's been here?
I think probably the most meaningful one was the Detroit game. Even though it didn't mean anything to the 49ers as far as their schedule, at that point, I really looked at it as his audition tape for the rest of the NFL because you could feel it coming. And so the other thing is just the fans have been so supportive the whole time, and that really showed it on a rainy, windy, cold night. There was 56 or so thousand out there, and there was for no other reason than Joe at that point to watch him play. And I know it was probably the most difficult game that he played after not playing in almost 2 years, and you know, just hoping that, like he said, everybody would be on the same page and just give him the opportunity.
Is there any special thing you'd like to say to the Bay Area fans before you go?
The appreciation, I wish I could show enough of my appreciation to them for the appreciation they've shown me over the years, but it's almost impossible. It's just, I could never catch up to them. And the other is that I just hope that they understand about this decision, that it wasn't just the 49ers, and they'll look at it from a little bigger picture and see the outside of it from the outside and say that this probably is what's best for the 49ers at this time, and that all weighed on our decision is that we looked at the future of them, and this is the best thing for them going into the rest of the 90s, and for me to get an opportunity to play again, and not just sparingly.
Well, I felt behind that stiff upper lip and the outthrust chin that couple is probably about as sad to go and leave town as most of the people around the Bay Area here are to see them go.
I think it showed. Yeah, bittersweet time all around.
You bet.
Thanks, Wayne. Right. Hank?
Well, as Joe Montana bid his goodbyes today, the news really hit the Bay Area like a bomb. For a lot of people, the morning came to a dead halt because the news conference was broadcast live. Rick Kwan spent the day at Ground Zero, the 49ers training facility in Santa Clara, and he has this report.
Ruined 14 years, Joe Thomas. I've been through all of that, and when he came, it made all...
Fans of all ages were mourning the loss of Montana outside the Niners complex today. About 200 fans gathered to try and catch a final glimpse of number 16.
We want Joe!
Yes, Joe is leaving after 14 seasons, and despite what you may have heard over the last few days, he remains a fan of the 49ers and a great friend of owner Ed DeBartolo.
It's all because of him that this organization was turned around, and I hope that in this light that everyone would still support this team and not have some of the feelings that I've been hearing around, because all in all, it is a great organization.
Niners management has taken more than a few hits over the handling of Montana, but Carmen Policy hopes the worst is over.
It's bad, and it's especially bad because we feel it's not deserved, because we feel we tried to be more than fair to Joe. We feel that there was every opportunity given for Joe to stay, and we didn't really want Joe to leave this organization.
Among the most disappointed to see Joe go were his former teammates.
Well, you know, I'm a little down. You know, it's like somebody's died in your family or something, I guess. I'm a little disappointed. I love this organization, and I'm a little disappointed that we waited so long to get that offer to Joe.
I've seen him, you know, do some incredible things out on the field, and you just hate to see him not get the opportunity to come back and play and do it with you and have to worry about playing him down the road.
When the Montanas tried to leave the complex, they were mobbed by the media and the masses. Joe was headed to Kansas City. An era had come to an end. In Santa Clara, Rick Kwan, Channel 5 Sports.
Well, both Joe Montana and the 49ers agree one of their top considerations in making this decision was serving their fans.
This is really so much more than a sports story. People here have come to identify Joe Montana with the Bay Area almost in the way they consider the Golden Gate Bridge or sourdough French bread. Manuel Ramos has more on how they took the news.
What a sad day. It is a sad day.
This may have been the only day Bay Area fans had a hard time watching Joe Montana on TV.
It's sad. I mean, this man is bigger than life in this area, and the performances he's given us on the field have really made him a hero for our time, and we don't like to see our heroes walk off stage.
Pretty disappointing. Joe's a great athlete, you know, and just feel fortunate that I was able to see him play here in the city.
And maybe a week of will he stay or will he go prepared them for the worst.
Just wants to play, and he's going to go where he can play.
We all love him, and we all want him to stay, but let him move on.
And some people couldn't care less.
I like Steve Young anyway.
I wish he would just gracefully go out instead of going out maybe not so well.
Some people wonder what all the fuss is about. One woman said she couldn't believe the importance being put on the Montana trade. She pointed out that yesterday's Chronicle headline on the cult suicide in Waco was nowhere near as large as today's headline on Montana being traded.
Some tried to keep it in perspective.
I think San Francisco has greater concerns than this at this point.
Willie Mays went to New York. Y.A. Tittle went to New York. Joe, and great quarterback, still can play, but again, business is business.
And business is business. There were no Montana t-shirts or other souvenirs at one sports shop, and since no one had been asking for any today, there were no plans to order any Montana memories. In San Francisco, Manuel Ramos, Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
If at this point you're asking yourself why all the hype over the Joe Montana trade, consider this. Here is a list of the top 10 rated television events in the Bay Area since last September. 7 of those events are 49er football games. As for where the 49ers go from here on without Joe, our own Joe Fonzie, looks into that later in sports.
All right, there is other news today. We have several other big stories to tell you about tonight. Just a few hours ago, a violent prison siege in Ohio finally ended. Inmates at the prison in Lucasville began emerging from cell blocks with their hands up.